What's going on, guys? Welcome into the Relay with Russ Dorsey. I hope you're having a great week wherever you are. Welcome into episode 8 of the podcast. We have 2 months worth of pods done, and it has been so fun and exciting to get to do this with you guys, to be able to bring this to you each and every week. I kid you not, every week I'm at the ballpark, whether that's here in Chicago at Wrigley or the Rate, or I'm abroad at Dodger Stadium, wherever, people come up and ask me about the podcast, and that's really cool. That means people are seeing the clips, they're listening, they're watching on the YouTube channel and getting the word out about the podcast. And I could not be more happy that people have been enjoying the conversation, enjoying the different discussions that we have here on the Relay with Russ Dorsey. And I really hope that those continue. It's been fun. It's been fun to be able to bring this to you each and every week and prove each and every week. That's something that I always want to do for you guys. So I always want to come in and say thank you to you, the listening audience. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your audio version of the podcast, I want to say thanks to you guys watching on YouTube. The YouTube channel is growing. The YouTube channel is definitely growing. The month of April, we finished with over 100 subs. Month of May is almost halfway done, and we're swiftly approaching 200 subscribers. So we're averaging almost 100 subs a month. And so we want to keep that pace going. I really appreciate everybody out there who has subscribed to the YouTube channel. Type in Russ Dorsey, type in the Relay with Russ Dorsey. You'll see the videos pop up. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, for watching, and for telling other people that love baseball about the podcast, because that's the biggest thing. Like, if people listen to the podcast and they are enjoying it and they enjoy baseball, they're going to enjoy this podcast, because we have a lot of different types of conversations, and we're going to be bringing in a lot of fun guests here soon. We actually have a guest coming up here very soon that I'm very excited to bring to you guys. So it's going to be fun as we continue to roll here in episode 8. All right. Now that we have that out of the way, one more thing. You can email the podcast, relaywithruss@gmail.com. If you have a question you want to ask me pertaining to baseball or life, you could do that too. Relaywithruss@gmail.com. All right, guys. So the first thing I want to get into on this week's episode of the podcast is a guy that is a monster name in Major League Baseball, having a very interesting start to his 2026 season, and that's Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, Fernando Tatis Jr., right fielder for the San Diego Padres, is a superstar in the sport. And I think people who see Fernando Tatis Jr. know that he's one of the best players in the game when he's on. But this season, so far, Fernando has 0 home runs. 0 home runs. Now, he's slashing .243, .319 with a .292 slug with those 0 home runs. He has the second most at-bats in Major League Baseball without a home run, Chandler Simpson being the guy ahead of him. And it is a very unusual season. And you're probably saying, all right, Russ, why is it an unusual season for Fernando Tatis Jr.? Yes, he hits homers, but what makes this any different than any cold stretch? Well, number one, for Fernando Tatis Jr., he's crushing the baseball. He's 99th percentile in hard hit percentage. So what this means outside of the analytics, he's crushing the baseball each and every time he barrels it. He's barreling it up a lot, which is important, right? You want to hit the baseball hard. He's doing that. But here's the downside. He's hitting the baseball directly into the ground. He is pulling the ball in the air at a career low 5.6%. So in modern baseball, getting the ball in the air to the pull side is of utmost importance, right? That's getting the bat head out in front. That's being able to launch the baseball, being able to hit for power, being able to drive the ball, right? So Fernando, who notoriously throughout his career has been able to pull the ball, especially in the air, to tap into that power, has not been able to do that whatsoever. 5.6% pulled fly ball rate. He's hitting the fewest fly balls of his career. On the other side, he's hitting the ball on the ground more than he ever has. Over 50% of the time, ground ball rate for Fernando Tatis Jr. So it's one of those things where you look at the swing, it looks like Fernando Tatis Jr., but the results don't say Fernando Tatis Jr. And one thing that's always been interesting to me about Fernando is he's a guy that tinkers with his swing a lot, even when he's going right. So if you've watched him over the years, he's gone to the big leg kick. He's gone to more of a toe tap as his timing mechanism. He's been a one-hand finisher. He's been a two-hand finisher, especially when his shoulder was popping out a lot. Then he got that fixed, went back to being a one-hand finisher with the swing. So he's a guy that adjusts his swing and swing mechanics a lot. And when you're as athletic as Fernando is, you can get away with a lot of that where other people might not be able to. But right now, it's just not going how Fernando expects. The interesting part about it is the San Diego Padres have been able to sustain that start that Fernando's been able to have. Honestly, as a team, they haven't really swung the bats that well. Manny Machado hasn't gotten going. Fernando obviously hasn't gotten going. Xander Bogaerts, Jackson Merrill hasn't gotten going yet. Yet they are at the top of the NL West, right there with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So they need Fernando Tatis Jr. to get where they want to go. Like, for the Padres to be the team that we expect them to be, for the Padres to be the team that they expect to be, like, they need Fernando to be an 800 OPS, right? Fernando being a 600, 550 OPS guy, that's not going to get it done, right? Like, I think the big part of Fernando's story that you have to tell is we know that he got popped for PEDs, right, back in 2022. And the player that he was paid to be when he got the $340 million deal was the guy that was closer to the 1,000 OPS, 40 homers, etc. We haven't seen that guy, and I don't think we'll see that guy the remainder of his career, but he has showed that he can be an extremely productive player, both offensively and defensively, right? Instead of being the guy that hits 40 homers, he might be the guy that hits 25, steals 35 to 40 bags, and then plays Gold Glove caliber defense in right field. Actually, was a Platinum Glove winner there. So I think there's a way for Fernando to continue to be productive, but in order for him to do that, he's really going to have to, sooner rather than later, figure out what's going on with his swing, and especially getting the ball in the air a lot more than he's been able to. Now, over the last week or so, he started to go back from the toe tap that he was doing to the leg kick that he's done a decent amount during his career, maybe try to get that ball in the air, launch a little bit more. But that'll be something that we'll have to watch here as we go, because going into the middle of May and seeing Fernando Tatis Jr. with a goose egg in the home run total, that's not something that we're used to seeing. So a team we need to talk about and maybe figure out what they're going to do at the trade deadline, but also beyond, is the San Francisco Giants. The Giants are the third worst team in Major League Baseball as we sit today. They are right there with the Colorado Rockies and the New York Mets. And that was not supposed to be the case when Buster Posey put this team together. They are just not clicking as a cohesive unit, as a 26-man roster. You bring in Tony Vitello from the University of Tennessee to be the manager. You know, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago with some of the things that Tony was dealing with on the learning curve that he would have to go through in his first year managing in the big leagues. But also, they're just not hitting like you thought the group of names in their lineup would hit. Guys like Rafael Devers and Jung-Hoo Lee, Willie Adames, Matt Chapman, Elliot Ramos. Those guys just as a team right now aren't playing well, aren't hitting well. And you start to ask yourself, what are the Giants going to do, not only in 2026, because, you know, we're at a point in the year and we talk about Memorial Day being the day where teams look and evaluate themselves and say, hey, what are we? We're going to get to a point here really soon where the Giants have to look at themselves really closely and say, we're not a good baseball team and how do we address this, not only for the interim, but for the future as well. And the answer to that is a lot more challenging and complex when you look at, some of the financial commitments that the Giants have made over the last couple of years. Now, number one, Rafael Devers, when they traded for him, they took on all of that salary. Now, Rafi was on over a $300 million deal when he signed that with the Boston Red Sox. When the Giants acquired him, they took on all that money. There is still 8 years and $226.5 million on that deal if you include all of the 2026 season. Jung-Hoo Lee has 4 years, $87.5 million remaining on his deal. Willy Adames has 6 years, $156 million remaining on his deal. That is that one he signed last offseason. And then Matt Chapman, 5 years, $125.8 million remaining on his deal. And so when you look at all the financial commitments that the Giants have in front of them, you say, okay, even if you wanted to blow it up, how can you do that with some of the commitments, the performance? Because look, Rafael Devers has not played like a player with $226.5 million remaining on his deal. Willy Adames has not been the guy that signed that $182 million deal a couple of off seasons ago. Like, he just hasn't looked like that guy offensively and defensively this season. And so you wonder how do you have to just eat it for right now if you're Buster Posey and let those guys bounce back next season and beyond? Like, if you have a team out there that's willing to take on $226.5 million for Rafael Devers, please show me who that is. Because as of right now, I don't know a lot of teams in Major League Baseball, especially ahead of what could be a potential lockout coming after the season is up, that would want to take on that money, especially if Rafi's not performing like the 850, 900 OPS player that he was when he signed that deal. And so for the Giants, they're not a team with a ton of young talent in their minor league system. Like, they're not a top 5, minor league system. They did promote Bryce Eldridge, who is one of their top prospects, last week. And so that's something that can provide a jolt, some youthful energy into their lineup. Should be a really talented player if he hits like many expect him to, one of the top prospects in Major League Baseball. But outside of that, they're a very veteran group of players. Obviously Matt Chapman and Willy Adames, and Rafi still has 8 years on his deal. And then you say, okay, well, what can you do in the interim being the 2026 season? There are a couple of guys that you could probably move. I think the guys that I named and are very hard to move in the next year. Elliot Ramos is a guy I think you could potentially move. He still has a couple of years of club control, was an all-star for the first time last year, having a decent season this year. That could be a guy that you could potentially package for some young players at the trade deadline. If there's a team that needs a corner outfielder, corner outfield bat, he could be a guy that fits that void. Robbie Ray is the surefire answer for the Giants at this year's deadline. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, having a decent season. That's the easy one, right? Robbie Ray should be, teams that need starting pitching, which is a lot of teams right now, they're probably calling Buster Posey about Robbie Ray. And then the last one, and this is one I know Giants fans probably don't want to hear, and especially for a guy that's been there for so long, a local product, Logan Webb. Now, Logan Webb had not been having the 2026 season that we have seen from him since he got to the big leagues. Logan Webb is one of the most consistent starting pitchers that we have in Major League Baseball, and this year it just has not been that. He's also on the IL currently, but if Logan Webb comes back off the IL and starts to look like the Logan Webb that we've seen for so many years, could that be a guy that you can move? I think if he shows that he's the same Logan Webb outside of the struggles, I think that's a guy that you could get a decent return on, because he did sign a more team-friendly extension a couple years ago. There's still some club control on that. And so for teams looking for starting pitching, maybe that's the guy that you look at and potentially try to acquire to bring in, because there's a lot of teams that would love a Logan Webb on their roster and would say, hey, with our pitching infrastructure, with our pitching lab, we get them in a different location with a chance to win. You see the Logan Webb that is a frontline starter in Major League Baseball. But that's why this is such a predicament for the San Francisco Giants, is because there's no easy fix. Any fix for the Giants, you're talking about 2 to 3 years away if the guys that they have in their lineup don't bounce back. And when you have a guy like a Rafael Devers that has over $200 million remaining on his deal, and the offense has fallen as much as it has, that's when you really start to get worried, because you never really talk about guys that aren't 30 yet, where you talk about having to eat money on deals and on contracts. And so for the Giants, that's one that they're going to have to ride out for a little while and hope that Rafael Devers turns back into the Rafael Devers that he was in Boston when he was an all-star, getting MVP votes, turn into that guy. Other than that, they're going to be in this kind of soup in the bottom third of the league, and that's a spot that no team wants to be in, especially for a couple of seasons. But in a division where you have the San Diego Padres, who have new ownership that has spent money, when you have a team in the Los Angeles Dodgers, and we know what they've done over the last several years and will continue to do with their ownership group's investment in them, and they have the best player in the world and some of the best players in the world, plural. You can't just be in the middle, or even worse, where the Giants are as the third worst team in Major League Baseball. Can't do that. So the Giants are going to have to pick a lane here, and I would say in the next 4 to 5 weeks, and decide what they want to be, not only in this year, but in the next couple of years as they go, to try to figure out what they want to be as an organization. So I know on last week's podcast, we discussed how bad the American League was. And as we sit here today, still bad if you haven't checked American League standings. But one of the teams I mentioned that was performing well, one of those teams over 500, was the A's. The A's of West Sacramento, formerly of Oakland, soon to be of Vegas, however you want to say it. The A's are balling. They are leading the American League West. And I think it's time we start looking at the A's as a real threat in that division. Now, I got to tell everybody, I got to admit, I was very early on the A's. I drunk the Kool-Aid last year, going into last season. I love their position player group. I love their young bats that they had on that roster. Still do, right? When you talk about Nick Kurtz, and he hadn't even gotten to the big leagues yet, and you saw what he did. Look at Lawrence Butler, Brent Rooker, Jacob Wilson, Shea Langeliers. He goes on and on. Tyler Soderstrom, Denzel Clark in the outfield. Like, they just had a litany of talent. And so I looked at that and I said, you know what? This team is figuring out how to get really good, productive position player talent to the big leagues and have them be successful. What I did not account for was just how difficult it would be to pitch in that ballpark. The A's learned very quickly that the ball flies at Sutter Health Park out in West Sacramento. And so they did not have the season that we expected them to have, coming off of a really strong end of the 2024 season. If you remember how they performed a couple of seasons ago at the end of the season there. But this year, they look like the team to beat in the American League West, with some other teams like the Mariners and obviously the Angels. You look at the Rangers, you look at the Houston Astros and the start to the season that they've had. This is the right time for the A's. They're playing the best ball of any team in that division. They're the only team above 500 in that division. And they're led by a guy who many people might not know, but you need to learn the name, Shea Langeliers. Shea Langeliers is one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball. If the season ended today, you can make a really good case that Shea Langeliers would be the AL MVP. Currently slashing .336, 394, 617 with 11 homers. He's leading the American League in hits. He's fifth in baseball in OPS. Shea Langeliers has turned himself into an offensive juggernaut in that A's lineup. He has been so good. And I think the last couple of seasons, you've seen the power from Shea Langeliers, but he is one of the, I believe as of today, he's the leader in wins above replacement in Major League Baseball. He's the only guy as of right now that has a WAR over 2. So that just shows how he's been able to do it both offensively and defensively behind the plate. He's having one heck of a start to the 2026 season. Nick Kurtz is an on-base machine in that lineup. Now, we talked about him a lot last year because he was a Rookie of the Year. I voted for him for Rookie of the Year. And the season that he had, he was third in OPS behind Judge and Ohtani in his rookie season. You saw the big-time power. This year, you're seeing the elite ability to get on base at a high clip. He's currently riding a 34-game on-base streak. He had that long stretch of over 20 games where he drew a walk. This season, he has a .414 on-base percentage. He's second in Major League Baseball in walks. Just an extraordinary talent going into the second year of his big league career, second full season of his big league career. And those are the two pillars in the A's lineup right now that make me say, you know what? They start to get healthy. They're going to be a really dangerous team. Brent Rooker hasn't even swung the bat like we've seen him swing it in years past. Lawrence Butler hasn't swung the bat like we've seen him do it in years past. And so when those guys really get going, this is a team that's going to be able to bang, right? Like that's always been their advantage and their strength is they're going to be able to put runs on the board and they're going to be able to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Now, the big thing for me when I look at the A's, can they get enough starting pitching? That's the question, right? When you look at how they've performed since they moved to Sacramento, it's been a struggle. And I talked about it a couple of minutes ago. The A's had the worst home ERA in Major League Baseball last year. And it was worse by over a run. That's how difficult it was for the A's to get quality starting pitching when they were at home at Sutter Health because the ball flies there. And I think we learned last season just how much the ball flies there. You would see plenty of scores from Sacramento where it was 9-7, 6-5, 7-6. There are a lot of those types of games out there. When it gets warm out in Sacramento, it is one of those places where the ball really travels. And we've seen that with some, absolute bombs that have been hit out of that ballpark. And so for the A's, they're going to be able to score runs, right? They're going to be able to hit homers. Can they get enough starting pitching to make those runs and that run support matter? That would be the biggest thing as I watch the A's the rest of 2026. They'll be able to score runs, but can they get enough consistent starting pitching to give themselves a shot, not only in the regular season, but if they end up, holding on to their lead in the AL West and doing it, in the postseason as well. But the A's, they are the team right now leading the pack. Now, I expect the Seattle Mariners to figure some things out here over the next couple of weeks. They've always been a team that just over the last 5 years, they're going to just not have a hot start in the first half. Now, last year was different than what they had done before. Usually they have the cold start. Last year, they had a hot start and were able to carry that all the way through the postseason. This year kind of looks like their normal type of first half where they get off to the slow start and then turn it on in the month of June, July, and beyond in the second half. But, you can only do that so many times before it stops working. Fortunately for them this year, you don't have to. It doesn't look like you're going to have to worry about the Houston Astros at all. That looks like that thing is about to come to an end here very soon. The Texas Rangers are a team that, they have some weeks where they look really good. They have some weeks where they don't look as good. And so I think in this division this year in the AL West, it's just going to be about who gets hot. And as of right now, the A's, they're hot. Before we get out of here this week on the Relay with Russ Dorsey, we got to talk about Matthew Boyd. Poor Matthew Boyd was just out there on the morning before a game like he always does and went to spend some time with the kids, went to get on the ground with them and tears his meniscus. Just that's one of those ones when you cover sports long enough, you hear about the wildest injuries. That is gonna go on the list. You're playing with the kids on the ground and you go to get up or go to the ground and tearing up your knee is insane. Fortunately for Matthew Boyd and then the Chicago Cubs, who have had their fair share of injuries here over the first 8 weeks of the season, just has to get the trim. There's two types of surgeries when you tear a meniscus. The trim is the one where they trim off the damaged part of the meniscus. That's a 4 to 6 week recovery time. The full recovery, if you have to get the surgery where they have to do the full repair, that is the one that usually puts guys out for the entire season. So fortunately for Matthew Boyd and the Cubs, he does not have to have that one. But a scary thing out there, if you're a dad out there trying to play with the kids, be careful when you're getting up and getting to the ground, because you do not want to tear your meniscus. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this week's episode of The Relay with Russ Dorsey. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. Thank you for watching. Be sure, if you want to listen to the podcast, you can listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your audio version of podcasts. Be sure to follow the pod so you get the new episode each and every week. Give us 5 stars. If you leave a review, please do that as well. If you want to watch the podcast, you can do that on our YouTube channel. You can type in Russell Dorsey. You can type in The Relay with Russ Dorsey. You'll see the logo for the pod pop up. Please subscribe. Don't be afraid to leave a comment on the videos, whether that's the full episode, whether that's the segments that we drop every day after the full pod drops. And be sure to share with your friends. Share it with them via text, via social, anywhere you see it. Reshare it, repost it, retweet it. Do whatever you do. We are trying to grow this thing, and we have been able to grow this thing here over the first 8 episodes of the podcast. You can also email the pod, relaywithruss@gmail.com. We've had some good emails throughout the first couple of weeks of the pod, and we got to continue to grow that. But want to say thank you to everybody out there for listening, for watching, for sharing. If you see me on the street and you say, hey, Russ, I like the pod, like people have been doing, I appreciate that as well. We want to continue to grow this thing over the course of the season and beyond. So thanks for listening to this week's episode, watching this week's episode, and I will catch you guys next week.